I've only been asked to do this a couple of times, and I got to tell you, every time I am, it's kind of like getting promoted in the Army. I think there's just a lack of options. So I'm always a bit surprised. For those of you that don't know, I'm Toby Risner. My wife and youngest son couldn't be with us today. He is sick. We didn't want to bring that to the church. But I'm joined by my daughter, Erin, my son, Elijah, and my youngest daughter, Ava. If you don't mind, I'd like to just open with a quick prayer. Heavenly Father, please give me the words to get through, and just really what I hope is that it draws, the story isn't about me or the particular lessons, just that it draws people closer knowing that it's a shared journey, regardless if the circumstances are different. Amen. All right, this morning, I will touch on a brief history. I had to Google this like I do a lot of things, and they said a good one was before your conversion and then after, and I added some takeaways. I got to tell you, there's no eureka moment, and I'll go over that. There was no lightning bolt that caused my conversion. It was a general progression. So for all of you out there that might be a little thick in the head like I am, I think that might be the progression. I was born and raised down the road in Castle Rock, class of 1990. My father came from a large, devoted family of Catholics, but I'm told they rarely attended. Dad was different. Mom rarely attended, but my brother, sister, and I were made to attend regularly in our youth. We learned the basics of Christmas, Easter, and confession, but really just couldn't wait to get back out to ride dirt bikes or get on to something more worthwhile with my Sundays. It was off again as we grew older, but before that, I do remember one time we were baptized. And for those of you non-Catholics out there, they dip your head at a very young age over this tub, and we thought it was quite weird, but at the same time, it was the first time I ever felt clean in a completely different way, and I was baffled by it. And my brother and sister and I were in the back of this car going home and whispering, like, did you feel something? And it was just strange how we felt better that day. Growing older, I knew I wanted to fly helicopters. I continued to go on again, off again church with Dad as I had better things to do, whether it's sports or whatever. I wanted to fly helicopters. My energies and likely prayers were focused in that direction, probably as more of a deal, hey, God, if you do this, then maybe I can do. Not really any commitment to the Lord. I'm going to use the word I. Worked very hard, and my path took me through community college, then on to Central Washington University through a path not chosen by me, but ultimately was way better than what I could have planned. But I had no understanding in looking back how the I was really a guiding hand. I was thankful for my parents' guidance and my own hard work. I met Colleen, who asked me to attend church with her and her family when we visited St. John, and I thought, sure. There's a girl, I like her, if church is in the cards, and so be it, I'm not scared. I graduated college with an Army aviation career, a soon-to-be bride, a paycheck, and yet somehow was really grumpy. Church attendance was sporadic at best. We would go every now and then, I'd feel better, then I'd go off to pursuing what good, hard-working people did. I was starting to ponder that early baptism and my own grumpiness at having achieved my childhood dream and yet still just being profoundly unhappy for no good reason. So how was I converted? Like I said, there was no eureka moment where I dropped to my knees in amazement. I can't put a date to everything. Somebody once preached that if you don't remember the date, the time, and the place, then you're probably not converted. I need to disagree with that. I don't know if it's too many headshots or just, again, being thick, but I don't remember that eureka moment. I call it the Dullard's path to life with Jesus. We attended church regularly at this point, but I would show up late because I hated singing, and I left early because I didn't want to talk to people. And yet, this is laughable now. I would complain about how you all wouldn't want to get to know us. But I gave you no opportunity, or the churches at that time. These all seemed very fake. But I was putting forth no real effort. That empty feeling would come and go with sporadic attendance. Then I deployed to Iraq for the first time in 1995. One of the chaplains there, they did this, what I didn't know was a Bible study. They said, hey, come and read this book with us. It's called A Purpose-Driven Life. I thought, man, that's excellent. I'm not sure if I want to stick with this Army thing. I need some purpose in my life. I had no idea, again, we're going back to the thick thing, that this might be about Jesus. But that's what it was all about. It was about a purpose-driven life and living for Jesus, and some of it started to resonate with me. That was probably the first time I gave myself to God, and it just kind of, just that empty hole and being with over there and with that particular chaplain, it just had meaning. So I confessed my sins. I earnestly believed for the first time in God's gift through the sacrifice of His Son, and I invited Christ into my life. And I was really proud of myself when I found my way to a phone sometime thereafter, and I called Colleen because I was going to do that husband directing thing. And you know what? We need to give that Cliffdale Community Church a shot. I think we've been a little remiss. And she said, that's great. I've been regular attending since you left. So once again, Colleen was way ahead of me. When I got home, Colleen and we struggled with the baptism thing. Not that we wanted to, but what it was. And I believe I'm accurate, and somebody feel free to correct me afterwards, but as an outward sign of an inward belief, Colleen and I were rebaptized one after another there at Cliffdale Community Church, and it was by immersion. Moving into life since. I regret to inform you, my nature, my core sinful nature, is still there. It's just shaped and ignored, if that's the way to go. I remain a go angry early kind of person. You don't see that. My kids have. Unfortunately, my wife has. And when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So my innate character remains, but tempered and open to God's guidance. And by that, there are certain things that happened afterwards that I now see God's hand in. One was, Colleen would be better with this with my timing, but I remember one trip, been gone for close to a year. We were separated, not by, it was just circumstances. She was in Spokane, and we were thinking about getting out of the military, so I was elsewhere. And couldn't wait to get home to see her, and worst flight ever. One was canceled. I was put on standby, and I'm waiting, and I'm calling Colleen, and I'm just complaining and bitter. And there's a mom sitting there, and she has a child in a wheelchair that is developmentally delayed, maybe the best way to put it. So in my anger, in my frustration, I thought, well, if I'm here, I might as well be of use. And so I asked her if I could help. Turns out all I could do was carry her bags, and she was way overloaded. And she worked with her kid and got her on the plane. And then the next one, I said, where are you going? Well, I'm transitioning to this flight. Hey, well, me too. Weird. And so probably called Colleen, still complaining about the worst trip ever. And got her on the plane, and that was to her final destination. And then we separated sometime in there. I made it home. I think my bags got lost. It's still the worst trip ever. And we went to this church in Spokane that would happen to be there. And I was sitting there in the pew when that might have been that lightning bolt moment. And I was like, man, what a terrible... Wait! That was the best trip ever. I finally started to see God moving me, not where I wanted to be, but where He needed me at that moment. And I was baffled. I remember the church, and it was right before the pastor said, anybody have anything to add? And that was the first time in my life, again, I was raised in a Catholic church. You don't speak. You certainly don't raise your hand, and you do not stand up. But I stood up, and I raised my hand and said, I got something. And I shared that story. I couldn't believe it. It was just great. It was bursting. It was crazy. I'd never experienced anything like that. So there's other moments in there, but we ended up in Alaska, in another one of those God moving us moments. We didn't have a place to live. We had Aaron, who was about 4 weeks old at this time. Winter was 3 weeks away or 3 months away. We had no home. And we went to this breakfast at a community place, and there was this older lady named Miss Alma. And every older lady wants you to go to their church, and so she was super excited about this church, and we put it in the okay category, crazy lady. And then as we're going through, we found this home. This guy was building a home, and he said, yeah, I was going to build it for my kids, but if you guys need a home, here you go. And by the way, do you have a church? Like, no. Well, we got this church at North Pole. Twice in 1 week, we had heard about this church at North Pole, and Colleen looked at me, I looked at her, and said, fine, you win, we'll go. Great experience. That was Randy Rowland. We were opened up to some very difficult preaching. One day, Pastor Ponsford asked me, Toby, which God do you believe in? I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, do you believe in yours or the God of the Bible? Well, I suppose I believe in the God of the Bible. And he would preach on some really tough stuff. How do we follow really bad leaders? Other challenging sermons were in there. He preached one day about how do you preach about a kid that lived sinfully all his life and through his own poor decisions died tragically as a young man, not following Christ at all. How do you get up and say something nice? And Pastor Ponsford would challenge us with those things. It was tough. But I was open to it. I probably would have ran just 3 or 4 years prior. Tithing. This is a tough one. I learned to give 10% when we didn't know when we could get the washer repaired. I found by trusting God and just throwing, because Trent Ponsford would say 10% belongs to God. Like, okay. And I found myself, and when I didn't have it, that's the first thing that I would pull back. Well, I need the washer. I need this. And there was one time, and I can't remember the circumstances, Colleen and I were not in dire straits, but it was uncomfortable. And we just said, you know what, just tithe 10%. And ever since I've done that, the big things have kind of worked themselves out, not perfectly, but giving back to God first, I have learned to just trust that based on my own experiences. It just works out better when I don't try to plan it or fix it myself. I prayed for patience one time, and I hit every red light in town. And I did it for weeks, not knowing that God would challenge me with learning patience, not just give it to me. And finally one day I was like, you know what, I'm just going to leave 15, 20, I don't care anymore. Green lights. I know that sounds silly, but it's absolutely true. A big one, our children. In 2005, Colleen and I had decided the business plan, it was time we're okay to have kids. I had 2 weeks to come home in my deployment, and the biological timing had been consistent with my wife since she was a young lady, and it was absolutely 2 weeks out. No way. I was home here. It just wasn't. And we both really wanted kids at that time, so we prayed and said, okay, well, when it is. When we got home, it was 2 weeks, and Colleen later informed me, she said, Toby, that's the first time in my life it was 6 weeks. The whole thing shifted 2 weeks to the right. And that's what I wanted you to hear this morning, sir. So I would have believed those things are crazy, whether it's a tree or whatever, it just doesn't happen. No, I believe those things you can't explain do happen, and it's not because of you or I. Since praying and trusting worked so well, we wanted some more kids. We did it again, and boom, there are the twins. And then somewhere in there, we decided we wanted a break, so we started to time it. And then we decided it was time to have kids, and nothing. Remember that we're a little bit thick sometimes? So when we tried to time it and design that path ourselves, it stopped working. Like, okay, sorry, God, for relearning this lesson, but here we go again. And then Isaiah was our last. Since having God, working with God, and believing in Jesus, humility, I have apologized to my wife and kids more times than I care to count. I have, like I said, I go angry earlier. I have a temper. They have unfortunately seen that, but through God's guidance, I have the humility to look at children from a very young age and say, I'm sorry, your dad is not being a good father, and I'm going to do better. It's a judgment-free zone, one of the most powerful lessons I've ever learned. I grew up male, heterosexual, play football, you don't get tattoos, you don't get earrings or piercings, and everybody else, if you skate, you're a skater punk. And I was very judgmental of people, but then I had my college experience, my U.S. Army experience, and my coming to God experience. And the last piece I needed was a lesson on judgment was reserved for God. And it took me it's probably, I don't know how long ago, but that was incredibly liberating for me because with gay aunts and uncles and people that I had previously judged, I was free and remained truly free from all that. Your story is unique. I appreciate the individual. I appreciate your background. Yes, there is a godly way to live, but those innate sinful desires are not mine to judge. And that was incredibly freeing for me. Trusting in God brought us here. We loved Alaska. It was Alaska or bust. Getting out of the Army, going to Alaska. I started working that 9 months before I departed, looking for jobs in Alaska. We're going to go to Alaska. I'm going to be a pilot. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And there wasn't a single job up there. And with months before it was time to get out and the paycheck was going to end, we moved to Cheney, Washington, because I didn't want anything to do with the west side. It's too wet. I'll never live there again in my life. My brother hurt himself, and it was a military-type decision. You weigh it, you know what's right, and we moved over. And this is the house up here in Rose Valley. There were two options, and one was a very horrible flip, and then there was this house up here, and that's where we ended up. I can't imagine being anywhere else, and I didn't design that. Current reminders. Been praying for patience. Been praying for direction. As you leave the military, you're the tip of the spear, your stuff really matters, gung-ho, and then you get out, and I'm telling you, it's just different. So I struggled with that. When I pray, these last couple of years, struggling with a work environment, the only word I got back is patience. All right. But while I'm being patient, I'm going to pursue aviation. I ran down to Lakeview, Oregon. I tried the aviation thing, which was a colossal, not a failure, but it wasn't working out. I flew 5 hours in 6 months, or 5 weeks, and I washed a lot of aircraft. I swept a lot of floors, and I did very little flying, and I was away from my family again. I was doing that. That wasn't by design. That surely wasn't being patient, so it took me a little while again, being thick. And I ended up with this last year, and I got to tell you, I have made less money this last year than I have in my life, and I'm far richer for it. That one zung me when I was out there working with my father, digging a hole. Making zero money, but I was with my dad. I didn't put myself there. That was God's hand. I pray for, what am I supposed to be involved with, God? Everybody, you're supposed to be involved somehow at the church. And I'm losing this thing. Currently, it's with the stewardship committee, but when I ask God, where am I supposed to be, I get it's the kids. Toby, don't try to do something great down in Lakeview, Oregon. There's 3 of them sitting right here, and 2 more at the house. It's help your kids become productive members of society. That is a mission. And then it's other kids. I had a friend recently tell me, in car purchases, I think I bought probably the worst RAV4 between here and Seattle and extending to Portland, for the kids. It was a decision. I went out there and I got it, and I was talking to a friend of mine. He goes, yeah, we pray before we make big purchases. Really? I should have prayed before I bought a car? That's both stupid and incredibly smart. Stupid from a man's point of view, but why not? I probably wouldn't work with this thing that has 2 wheels off it right now, waiting on wheel bearings. And, oh, by the way, leaks for the 3rd time. Okay. So, yeah, why not? Again, I'm still learning. It's where I started, the not eureka moments, and my life since. It's not perfect, but I wanted to end with some takeaways. God guides us before we really even know of His presence. My dreams of flying was achieved through His grace and guidance. Sure, there was hard work and support from my parents, but whose path was I really on? God is patient for those of us that are a bit thick. It's not a life without challenges. There's disappointments, joy, failure, recommitment, trials, happiness, and a slew of other emotions. That doesn't go away when you bring God into your life. But what I have learned, and I hope you follow this analogy, if you want to learn basketball, you go to the gym where people are playing basketball. You want to knit, go to where people are knitting, whatever skill that is. If I want to learn something, I don't go down to the bar and try to find the people down there to teach me how to play basketball. So the takeaway there is, why do I come to church? Because I find myself a better husband, father, and person when I hang around with other struggling fathers, husbands, and people. And that you all lift me up. and I appreciate you. You want to figure out or fill that God-sized hole in your heart? Go to church where others are doing the same. Each and every one of you, I'm convinced, out here doesn't have a perfect story. You have sinful nature. I don't need to hear the dirty details to understand that, but I share it with you. And for you and your testimonies, and when you're out there, just help people try to know that in church and with God's people is where you're going to learn to fill that God-sized hole that I couldn't fill as a young man when I was angry for no good reason. Tithe. Just do it. Be involved. Not everyone is easy to be with, but they all have unique stories. Open yourself up a bit. Life is not easier, but fellowship through shared experiences and hardships brings joy. You are not alone with your financial struggles, your child-raising concerns, your parental failure moments, a growing dislike and disdain for all things social media. You're not alone with your trouble with with your in-laws, your family, your friends, and what Uncle Ed would call the outlaws. And above all, you absolutely matter. If you want to understand how much, then choose to follow the one true God of the Bible, not the one based on, well, I think my God. Well, that's not the God of the Bible. Follow the God, capital G, of the Bible, capital B. God, Christ, the Holy Spirit, singular, is the answer to fulfillment. That's what I've found. Everybody, I thank you, and I appreciate each and every one of you. And I apologize, but we might have time for the pregame. I'm happy to meet each and every one. If there's any questions for further details, if I've been unclear in any way, but I wish each and every one of you the happiest of Sundays.